From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Monday. And yes, this is live. This is not an evergreen or a taped program. After last week, we had some scheduling issues and things like that that led us to lead with taped shows last week. Now it's back live, and we've got some catching up to do. We're going to get the phone number up for you and invite you to join in the conversation. Certainly, there was a lot that happened last week, and what we've been trying to do between now and the presidential election is have programs at least once or maybe sometimes twice a week looking at some of the new developments that are happening. And you may or may not be tired of it, and we're going to talk about some of that as well. But we're going to touch on what's happened since the last presidential debate. We didn't get a chance to talk about that last week. And then some of the developments over the weekend, some of the polls, your take on where things are going as we continue to just follow along on this whole parade as it makes its way toward the general election. Though, of course, early voting is underway. 737-7587 is the number. So if you want to talk about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, now's your shot. But let's get into some of the latest developments with us this morning. And, you know, we've got such a great pool of fantastic universities to draw from here. And from Lipscomb this morning, Professor Mark Schwartz. Good morning to you, sir. Nice to have you on.
Thank you.
Well, listen, you know, you're out there teaching at Lipscomb, and you deal with some of the younger end of the millennials, and just when he sat down, he's like, you know what, Nick, millennials probably aren't going to vote much this time around, right? They're frustrated.
Yeah, not as much as the last couple of elections. You know, it was 08 was like a magical time in some people's minds in terms of, you know, this is a historic moment, therefore we get out there and we vote, and we're a part of something larger. Things kind of tailed off in 2012, but you still had President Obama, again, a very inspirational figure. You have an inspirational story there. And now you don't have either one of those things. What you have are two people who are widely disliked for very substantial reasons. And both of these people have very long histories behind them. So people have very well-established opinions of them. And so people either have to say, well, this is a person I need to reflect within myself. Can I come out and vote for this person? Or is the other person so unacceptable to me that I can actually need to go out and vote as well?
Yeah, you suspect some of them will just stay home and not vote?
I think that there's going to be lower turnout than we've had the last couple of elections among some demographics. Among other demographics, you may actually have some go up.
Okay, I hear you on that. And when we talk about millennials, again, we kind of set that 18 to 30?
Sure, around in there. 18
to 30 for the millennials. And if they do stay home, what candidate do you believe that helps or hurts the most?
Well, it certainly hurts Secretary Clinton. The most.
It'll hurt her the most.
Most of them have identified either as Democrat or liberal during the last several years.
Okay, and the reason you feel that they would be abandoning her is that they feel as though what they've had the last 8 years was not everything they fully expected.
Sure.
And
well, you know, most of the things that they're concerned about are, you know, let's get out of Iraq, let's take care of social issues, let's get some help on education in terms of especially like student loans and things like that. And you've had some minimal movement towards that, and the major legislative act that you had from the Obama administration is Obamacare, and that's something that has had, at best, mixed reviews.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that they have experienced as not being the positive that they were promised.
Okay. So, well, that's interesting to me to think about. We hadn't talked much in some of the programs about millennials and where they were going to vote. And I think you're right. There'll be maybe some other groups that maybe vote more. So, you know, last week, of course, we had a tape show. And, you know, coming out of the final presidential debate, a lot came out of that. I don't know. As I said, and I think I went on Facebook and talked some on this, was just, it was more of the same in a lot of ways.
Yes, it was.
Right?
It was.
And I don't know that would have changed anyone's opinion if you're a core supporter.
Right.
Did it grab anyone that's on a fence? Which still, I'm amazed at this point that there are people potentially on the fence and can't decide which of the two candidates to vote for.
I don't think there is that.
Okay,
I think what you've got is, you know, you've got the support that shows up in the polls, and however that plays out, you don't really get a sense of, well, who are people actually strongly attached to? Who are they lightly attached to? Who are they just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to hold my nose while I'm doing it? The third debate, I think, was more about solidifying your support. And therefore, what that means is, what am I doing here that's going to affect the turnout?
Right.
So it's either depressing the other person's turnout and demobilizing them, or mobilizing your own support and getting them to come out and actually, you know, pull the lever for you.
Yeah, it seems to me now, since that debate and going through this weekend, even though they still have the personal attacks going on, both candidates are trying, and especially I think more so by Trump now, to articulate more policy positions.
Sure.
They're trying, okay, we've done the attacking, the debates are behind us, and let's lay out maybe for the voter a little bit more clear picture of what we want to do when we take office.
Well, Trump is trying to address the very thing that he's been criticized about, which is he's thin-skinned. Or if you look at what the Democratic Party is trying to say, they're trying to say he's crazy, that he's not trustworthy with these sorts of things. That's the temperament issue. Well, by putting out policies out there, by addressing things like this, and that's what he tried to do during the last debate. He kept his cool. He didn't respond to every little dig that came along. He kept to himself. I mean, he stayed. He
started off especially that way. I definitely saw at the beginning he had been coached, but eventually his spirit and what he wants to do comes through.
Well, I mean, you have to be yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what his supporters want him to be. They don't want the typical Republican. Okay, the typical Republican in the last several years has been, okay, we're going to make a gesture at standing up to the Democrats, but we're not actually going to do anything in terms of, every time there was a conflict or a showdown, the Republicans basically gave way.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be blamed for shutting down government. Because you remember what happened in the 90s when Newt Gingrich and those guys tried to do that with the Clinton administration. They just got slaughtered at the polls. Well, people kept coming back to the Republicans and saying, okay, we're going to give you this majority. We're going to give you this majority. And so a lot of Republicans, that's why they went to Trump. Trump was willing to punch back. And that's been a big part of this, even as Trump has brought in a lot of people who are not historically primary voters for the Republicans.
Right. I'll tell you, it's interesting around here, too, compared to some previous elections. Now, Tennessee clearly is nowadays a strong Republican state. Okay, it just is the way it is. But in past elections, occasionally I'd see a Democratic sign, and then I saw a lot of Republican signs. This time around, first of all, I think I can count on one hand the number of Hillary Clinton signs I've seen. But on the other hand, I have seen substantially more Trump signs, but still, a lot fewer, not even close to in the past. I mean, in general, I just don't see a lot of presidential signs out there. I do see more Trump signs, but not anywhere close to the number of signs in the past. I was just thinking about that driving in this morning as I looked. I haven't seen any Hillary ones, but I sure don't see as many. It's almost like people who are supporting Trump, and I believe Tennessee don't want to advertise it, but they're going to vote for it.
Yeah, I think you're totally right about that. I've noticed the same thing. On my drive to work in my area town, I've seen 2 or 3 Hillary Kane, Clinton Kane signs, and I've seen about the same number of Trump Pence signs.
Okay.
If you go into certain areas of town, I think you'll find a lot of Trump enthusiasm, but it's very concentrated. Clinton is not an inspiring feature. That's why they're pointing towards his negatives as opposed to really playing up her positives so much.
But there's no doubt in your mind Tennessee's going to go Republican.
Oh,
right. It's a strong one. What's interesting now, though, is you certainly see some traditionally Republican states that, if you believe the polls, and I've always been someone, I take them all with a grain of salt, but as the gap gets bigger, they're not usually that far off. But Texas, I mean, Trump maybe still, but it's closing there. Utah?
Yeah, Utah's a sort of the fly in the ointment when it comes to the Trump path to presidency, because the quote never Trump candidate, which was a movement within the conservative/Republican Party to anoint someone to be an alternative to Trump, but not actually be the actual candidate because it's post-convention, is a native of Utah and a Mormon. I think he's a native of Utah, I'm not sure, but he's at least Mormon. Came out of the Central Intelligence Agency, wrote a book a couple of years ago I read. So he's been at the top of the Central Intelligence Agency, but as a Mormon, he's able to be that alternative that comes from that state. And what they're trying to do, it seems like to me, is derail any attempt at a Republican presidency from Trump.
That's what it looks like. Listen, we'll take a break on that note. Just some observations from you since we haven't talked about it since the last debate. We're back here live. Professor Schwartz will be here with us. We're going to take your phone calls when we come back. We got Joe, Brian, Cindy, and others. We have some lines open. 737-7587. Call in, sound off on your candidate, what you think of the race so far, how things are going, and whether or not you buy the polls. We'll be back with more right after this. Stay with us.